Okie doke, integral friends, integral family, and just general team human. It's great to be with you and joining you in this, one of the wonderful puzzles of our bipedal experience here on this green-blue disco ball. I'm super grateful and eager to participate in this inquiry, in this conversation, especially from a more integrally informed approach. I'm going to begin with, there's three big categories that I just want to touch on. I'm just going to put together a general overview of what I think are some of the big legs of this table at this point in the menu of phenomena that are in this umbrella of UFOs, UAP, human, non-human contact, the entire menu of that non-ordinary or unconventional experience. There's three big things I want to speak about. And also, just before I begin to share with you, that I'm not going to go into my own personal experiences because I've shared those in detail in other places. And for instance, if you want to get an in-depth account of some of my experiences, you can watch the audio documentary Man Meets Mantis. And I've also done plenty of other interviews on Coast to Coast, and I've spoken with Sean Hargens, and I have no compunction about sharing my own personal experiences, although many of them I have not shared because they have occurred since I documented the first batch. So there's been other events since that time which have been informative and influencing on what I'll be sharing with you here tonight. So yeah, there's other stuff you can hear about my personal story on the web. And what I'd like to share with tonight are my thoughts on the high strangeness of these phenomena, on the other end of the spectrum, the prosaic range of features that are in this umbrella of phenomena, and then also in a more speculative tone, what I'm coming to think of as the forfeiture, or what could potentially be the forfeiture. So again, what I am going to speak about for the next few minutes is the high strangeness, the prosaic nature of the phenomena, and also what I'm calling the forfeiture at this point. So to begin with, and the reason I'm picking high strangeness and the prosaic is those are two ends of the same baton. And I think as a convenience, it's nice to feel into the disparate ends of this spectrum of our human experience with this really crazy puzzle that we're dealing with. So to begin with, the high strangeness, which I'm sure many of you are deeply acquainted with. And it includes, one of the ways that I like to begin to speak about the high strangeness has to do with the way that human consciousness is partitioned. And that refers to our waking awareness, our waking experience, our waking reality, our dreaming reality, and our deep dreamless reality. So for instance, within the Buddhist tradition that I've done a lot of practicing in, that's one way that the practices are cultivated and focused, is waking awareness, dreaming awareness, deep dreamless awareness. And many of you are familiar with Integral are also going to call to mind immediately the bodies that are associated with that, the so-called triumvirate of bodies, which is your gross body, your subtle body, and your causal body. And so in relationship to the high strangeness that attends these experiences, that attends these encounters, one of the easy ways for us to feel into the divide between what might be human consciousness and non-anthropomorphic consciousness is trying to imagine what our experience of reality would be like if waking, dreaming, and deep dreamless sleep were integrated into one coherent consciousness. And that fully integrated triumvirate became the locus of an awareness in which all of the qualities of those three disparate bodies, realms, types of experience, however you want to think of it, if that all became one simultaneously. There's a reason that this became one of my preferred ways of trying to understand the high strangeness that attends these experiences. And it came as a suggestion from one of the non-human entities that I've had contact with. Which isn't to say that if you can call to mind what it would be like to have those three integrated, that we necessarily then know what their consciousness is like. It's not like that. I don't think necessarily that this entity was telling me if you could experience the integration of waking dreaming and deep dream asleep simultaneously, then you would know my awareness. I think it was more trying to give me that as an analogy for the divide between anthropomorphic and non-anthropomorphic consciousness. So to begin on that high strangeness domain, I think one of the great wonderful magnets in this puzzle is us trying to imagine something that we really have no mooring to, we have no reference to. We are truly interacting in some of these instances with something that is not a human consciousness. And that doesn't mean we can't interact with it. It doesn't mean we can't have a relationship with it. It doesn't mean that we can't know anything about it, but it does mean that's, you know, compared to the cross-cultural tensions between the United States and Iran, or pick any two countries that have divergent cultural features, you know, that's nothing compared to what it is for us to navigate something that doesn't even possess the physical, corporeal, liminal, subconscious, like the ways in which we stratify and organize our interface with reality may not be transferable to the communication and relationship that we're entering into with them. And so from an integral perspective, that actually is one of the strongest endorsements for integral that I can think of, is that, of course, all domains benefit from a more inclusive, comprehensive, integral bringing to bear of tools and methodologies. But I think in particular, this one begs for it. The high strangeness of the phenomena, and that includes, again, UFOs, UAP, human, non-human contact, close encounter experiences, categories 1 through 7, all of that. So I think that that range of phenomena on that menu particularly begs for and benefits from an integral approach, because to my knowledge, there's not another set of systems that includes and inhabits quite as much. And my personal experience has been that so far, integral has been the most effective toolbox to bring to this truly confounding set of living interplanetary, interdimensional koans. We're basically entering into relationship with some incomprehensible set of koans. So beyond that, beyond the trying to imagine our partitioned consciousness integrated into one fully functioning locus of consciousness that would still be our humanity, we see all other sorts of components in the high strangeness of these phenomena. The craft themselves, not only do the entities have the capacity to physically pass through corporeal barriers such as walls and houses and buildings and the body of the planet itself. We see these entities do that and also take human beings through the walls of their home. Those inexplicable reports that go back decades and decades, coming from the very first human, non-human abduction / experience accounts. So you see that kind of violation of our normal conception of reality and physicality, but you also see the crafts themselves, the objects that these entities purportedly convey themselves in, let's say, also exhibit those strange kinds of properties in which they change shape. They seem to have a dynamic, almost liquid morphology of the material itself. So we see their craft behave in ways that, for instance, you would never see a submarine behave in. You would never see an airplane go from a cylinder to a square and then become a liquefied form of an object and then shoot at the speed of light into the vanishing point. We just don't see those things in our normal physical reality. And so The entities exhibit high strangeness. The craft and their modes of conveyance exhibit high strangeness. Their consciousness seems to be enmeshed with or integrated with, at times, the craft. So almost in an animistic kind of sense, it seems like the material that they're working with is sometimes an extension of their consciousness, or there's at least a more integrated relationship and enmeshment between their mind and the material in which they're conducting their work. And then you can also add to all of that telepathy, the permeation of a kind of signaling and symbol system that is vastly more sophisticated, nuanced, and multidimensional than our normal spoken language. And telepathy is sort of the tip of that iceberg. And then maybe down the list of a short list of high strangeness, I would tack on the kind of Jacques Vallée interpretation, or Jacques Vallée positing that, you know, there's a great signaling system going on here. There's a great control system of some kind, the nature of which we've not been able to divine and hasn't been disclosed to us. But his notion that over decades or centuries or even millennia, an intelligence that abides here has been steering and influencing humanity in ways that is scarcely detectable or discernible to us, I think is somewhere in the mix of all that high strangeness. So that would be my introduction to the first leg of this three-legged table, which I suppose is not the most stable table. Let's just call this a tripod. So high strangeness, let's put that aside for the moment, and then go all the way to the other end of the spectrum for what we could just call the prosaic. So inversely and in contrast to all of that mind-bending, liminal, fever dream, inexplicable, trans-rational, all the stuff that goes under high strangeness. On the other end of that spectrum, you have the prosaic. And this could be a very, very long list, but just to give you a little glimpse of stuff that many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with, these craft physically move over our nuclear silos and disarm our nuclear weaponry. That's an old story. It goes way back. It happened all around the world. It wasn't just the United States nuclear weapons that have been disarmed. It happened in Russia. It happened in, if you go to Robert Hastings' books, UFOs and Nukes, that's a great introduction to this. So in a real concrete sense, something that's an object has repeatedly moved over our nuclear arsenal and disarmed it. Continuing in that vein, like in the most concrete modality of our US military, of our branches of military service. Very recently, in the past few years, there's these military accounts from David Fravor and the entire Tic Tac community that's come forth, and the Navy itself, reporting that these objects that can fly 20,000 miles an hour and go from 80,000 feet out of our atmosphere to hovering over the water, stationary for hours with no heat signature, no visible means of propulsion, and yet they fuck with our military and toy with our fighter jets with utter impunity. And that also is the tip of the iceberg. If you want to investigate the myriad ways in which this technology, seemingly very physical and also seeming to violate the known laws of physics, has toyed with our military and toyed with our infrastructure, from flying over the Capitol to, the list is just endless. And so in that prosaic zone, something very physical, animated, intelligent is interacting with our military and with the most advanced technology that we have to protect ourselves, and it does so with impunity. Going beyond that, in the prosaic sense, this intelligences, there are entities which are violating the sovereignty of human beings, and for decades at least have been taking them against their will, taking us and harvesting our biological material in a completely in many cases, a kind of like sociopathic fashion, which is to say that if a human being did what some of these entities do, who come and take human beings and seem to be engaged in, let's speculate and say, which I think is not that far afield of a speculation, the hybrid breeding program, harvesting of our genetic material, the implants that are put into human bodies, like people's bodies, whether you're waking up with a bloody nose or you have an implant in your body somewhere, as I believe that I do, and many other people in my life have reported. Scoop mark scars, I have one of those, and the list is long, and the physical signatures are unmistakable. They're cross-cultural. They've been going on for decades. And again, they're prosaic in the sense that they are physical, concrete, and easily recognizable, and they are not attributable to some hallucination or psychological pathology. This is physical, concrete stuff. Just like craft leaving burn marks and impressions in the ground, our bodies have those same kind of signatures from the interaction with at least a set of these entities. Now, beyond that, you can follow that thread more deeply to see that the way in which those physical signatures and side effects, if you follow that thread, you see that they're tied to a very ambitious but concrete objective. Clearly, there's a plan in place, and there is a goal at the end of that plan. We have not been told, I would say, straight up, what the completely honest end of that objective is, but you can certainly speculate and make your guesses. And I would say there's a whole other subset of things that are maybe a bridge between the prosaic and the high strangeness, which is all the questions people who have these encounters. And now I'm speaking specifically about the abduction or being taken against your will and the violation of the sovereignty of the human body. If you're one of those kinds of experiencers, you obviously are asking yourself, well, why? What is this hybrid breeding program? Why are hundreds of thousands of people around the world and all over these disparate continents and across socioeconomic categories having these experiences? What's the point? What's the end game? And you can see very quickly that our experience, our perception of our experience with them is manipulated and distorted by them. They have the ability to do that. They have the ability and do control and manipulate our memory, whether it's through erasing it or placing screen memories in place, or lastly, and perhaps most importantly, having they control worldviews. From an integral sense, I would say one of the things that's going on here is that they clearly make an attempt to shape our worldview through these experiences, but also explicitly through what they tell us, whether it's telepathically or through a larger lifelong signaling system. So they're trying to shape our worldview. The effects are real on our body. The markers are real on our planet. And the way that they interact with our military, etc. That whole subset of the prosaic, let's put it over here, the prosaic has a very long list of ingredients that are just super physical and super strong. And then again, to make the bridge between the high strangeness and the prosaic, I would say is this integral equation of how and why worldviews are being controlled and shaped. Now, that's setting aside a much more nuanced and a much more complicated question, which is when they tell us that our world is in danger and ecological collapse is going to cause our planet to become uninhabitable and that our species is at risk of not existing. Is that true? Is that false? Is that the manipulation of a worldview? Is that them trying to make a bridge and meet us halfway with what our human experience is, in as much as it's accessible to theirs as non-human entities? Those are much bigger questions that we could get into outside of this little introductory setup that we're doing here. And so those are the first two legs of the tripod, as we'll call it now, which would be the high strangeness and then the prosaic, or the more physical. The last one which is more speculative, which I would like to set up as the, I guess this is what would lead into deeper discussions about this phenomenon. And that is what I call the forfeiture. The forfeiture ties into that manipulation of our worldview, or I guess that's speculation. They might be manipulating our worldview, or some of them might be. The forfeiture is what is reported in many, many experiencers' interactions with non-human entities, in which the non-human entities tell them, you have destroyed the planet to the degree in which you are no longer going to be allowed to be the stewards of this world. You are approaching the time in which the great privilege of the stewardship of this planet is about to be forfeited. And the reason that forfeiture is important is at least 2 or 3 points. Number one, many of the entities report that's the reason they're interacting with us. Again, is that true or not? I don't know. Let's set that aside for the moment. But many, many experiencers report that the entities have told them they are here because we got nuclear weapons. We've destroyed the ecosystem. We are creating a calamity which is so outrageous, it's impinging upon the reality of other entities which are not even human beings, but to whom planet Earth is also incredibly valuable. It's as though planet Earth is precious and profoundly important to entities in all directions in many dimensions, and that our human physical experience walking around on the Terra is just one of millions of points of intersection between these living sentient beings and this precious world. And so what we have done in screwing it up as bad as we have has been the forfeiture of our privilege of stewardship. And so that being number one, what follows from that is that according to some of these entities, that forfeiture has created a loophole. So as where normally human beings would be authorized and protected, let's say, to go about their own development unmolested or uninfluenced, it's kind of the Star Trek like non-intervention notion. Because we've screwed things up so badly and we've had such a negative impact on other non-human entities, their hand has been forced. They have to come here now and they have to intervene. And many of them report that they're not happy about that, that we're sort of screwing things up so badly that like little children who've created a disaster in the house, more developed beings with equanimity and the poise necessary for the mystery and mess at hand have been forced to come here and intervene. So you have the forfeiture by the human beings, the loophole created from that forfeiture, which allows for entities which normally would not be permitted to do what they're doing, whether it's abduction, hybridization, more direct manipulation or influence of our social, political, artistic, creative, spiritual systems, that more intimate commingling is occurring because we have created this loophole. Now, that's the forfeiture. Am I telling you that that is the accurate? No, I'm speculating, but I think it's an important one because it seems to be within the integral approach to this set of puzzles. I think that Integral is well equipped to begin to address, and Sean Harkins has done a great job of this, and Michael Zimmerman has done a great job of this, and many others within the Integral family I think are doing a fantastic job, and it gives me great encouragement to bring to bear the ecological, social, economic, spiritual, political, artistic, we do the whole methodological pluralism vertically, horizontally, in all expanding ranges as a sphere. That integral kind of intelligence is the one that can begin to tease apart these clues. Is the forfeiture truly something that's underway? Is the loophole something that's validly being exploited at this time? Those are things that I don't really know, but to conclude that frame up, those 3 legs on that tripod of like the high strangeness, which I think our esoteric, mystical traditions from an integral perspective are uniquely empowered to engage in a meaningful way. And the prosaic, which again, inversely on the other end of the spectrum, I think Integral has a tremendous set of tools to bring to bear on that, and a very unique kind of intelligence within the family that can take those two, bridge them together with all of the attendant questions that still linger from what I called the forfeiture and that third leg. And that is the simplest present framing that I can put together for the great puzzle, the phenomena, the menu of the phenomena. And I just want to close by saying that another thing that I think is underway, both in the culture at large and within Integral as a microcosm of that, is a real shift. I think we crossed a fulcrum in 2019. And you can point to many different starting places. You can point to several different events that were seminal. I think surely the Tic Tac, definitely Leslie Kean and her team's articles in the New York Times, which I believe were in the top 10 most read articles of 2019. Captain David Frager on Joe Rogan, I can make a list of probably a dozen. But in aggregate, I think that they all indicate that something did actually shift this year. Oh, another big one was Fox News. Tucker Carlson has just become a stentorian advocate for the legitimacy of these phenomena and their reality, and how they're actually very, very dire, serious issues for us to address. So, I'm not a Fox News watcher regularly, but I think that's, in the mix of things, that's another really important station, another important node in that shift. So that's happening in the culture at large. And then what I noticed and have spoken about publicly and privately with Sean and Michael and Ken Wilber and many other people within the Integral community, and you folks here today are part of that, and is that within Integral, there's a coming out of the closet. What you find is that if you go public with this, as I did with my Mantis experiences, you hear from a lot of people. Nine tenths of the experiencers have never gone public and don't want to and would not benefit from it. And the motivation would only be for the great generosity of their fellow human beings. They really don't have anything to gain from it. And I think that holds true in the Integral community. 9 out of 10, maybe even more so, because Integral folks are practitioners, and practitioners attempting to deepen their consciousness and engage more meaningfully with the cosmos as a whole and all of its inhabitants, whether you have the Bodhisattva's vow or the Christian imperative of love and compassion. Take any lineage, any tradition, and for that matter, religious or not. Integral folks, I think, are especially sensitive and deepened in a way that makes them wonderfully suited for helping us to do something significant and good with this situation we're in. So I see those two changing at the same time, the culture at large and the Integral culture in micro. I find that really encouraging. And then the last thing I'll say in closing it is just like, it's just time for us, in my opinion, this is how I feel, it's time to not even have the question of not have the conversation of is this happening? Is this real? Are there UFO? Those days are gone. It's done. That is too remedial to be indulged anymore. They are here. Who are they? What are they? What do they want? What are they doing? Where do they come from? Those are all great questions to look into. But at this point, it is truly not constructive, in my opinion, to engage in the conversation of trying to convince someone that these phenomena are real, whether that's in Integral or in the culture at large. We need to just move on to trying to meaningfully engage and address these puzzles, because they are so serious and so meaningful. And I actually think that the next 500 to 1,000 years of our future, not just ecologically, but as a species, our sovereignty is in question, our autonomy, our ability to mature into the cosmic beings that is our native endowment, but that we have not yet realized. Those are all in question. And so what could be more important? So thanks for letting me just speak a little bit, and I can't wait to see and hear from all of you where this conversation goes from here. So cosmic hugs.